Welcome to After the Visit, proudly brought to you today by Have a Chat. This podcast is about what really happens after customer conversations. Not the polished CRM version, but the reality once the visit ends. The car door shuts and the next meeting is already calling. Today, luckily enough, I'm joined by Sandor Franken. He's the State Sales Manager for Galvin Engineering across New South Wales and ACT. He's got 20 years in sales and more than 6 years leading sales teams in the plumbing wholesale industry. Sandor, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, Brandon.
To start off, just to give us some context, what does a real day look like for your reps? From the first visit to the last one, how many conversations are happening? And by the end of the day, how much is that still clear in their head, do you think?
So we have two different types of reps. We have specifying reps that look after architects and hydraulic consultants, and appointments are quite hard to set. And nowadays, and I guess especially since COVID, there's a lot of communication through email. It's become very standard now. And then we have reps that look after merchants and plumbers, and they can see a few more customers on a day. So starting with the reps that see architects, we actually broaden their range with some other customers too that are easier to visit. So on certain days they do say 4 or 5 visits, but usually architects wise it's driven by projects, and they probably see 3 or 4 architects in a week. The drive is obviously quality meetings, and everyone worked for companies where it was basically a KPI to do 6 to 8 meetings a day, which becomes a milk run, where I'm really focused on a team to get quality meetings and good outcomes. So basically break everything down, keep it simple, because when you overload them, the first week everything goes well, but the amount of work that follows through from that after a couple of weeks is extremely pressing on them, and then there's a lack of follow-ups, proper follow-ups indeed.
Yeah. So when do they typically capture their notes after their meetings, do you find?
So I encourage them to write down some notes after the meeting. Some actually write them down in the meeting. There's a couple of bullet points, because at the end of the day, you just don't remember exactly anymore what you've discussed with certain customers. So that's the first thing. Depending on the traffic, Sydney is very busy. You do need plenty of time in between. So sometimes there's the stress as well of getting to your next appointment. But it's very important to take 5 or 10 minutes, jot down a couple of important points, and then move on, so that by the end of the day or the next morning, you can actually summarize and send a follow-up email.
So when your reps are leaving customer meetings, what do you feel like actually determines whether their relationship with the customer is moving forward or whether it's slowly fading? And then in the days after the visit, what makes that real difference, do you think?
So I think the most important thing for a good sales rep is to listen to a customer. So when we talk about a follow-up, when they jot down some bullet points, it's really important that they write down what the customer's message was. So obviously, as a sales rep, you go in with a plan. You might want to present some product. You might want to sell a product. But often reps forget about what the customer really wants, and they can pivot quite easily to something that's important to them. So the most important in regards to building that rapport is when you write down your notes, that you actually write down initially what the customer mentioned to you during that meeting, and then at the end you can put your message in it, whether it's that information about the product, an attachment, etc. But I guess building that rapport with a customer comes down to making it clear that you actually listen to them.
100%. Always need to listen to your customers. It's the number one rule in sales. Listen more than you talk,
Yeah,
even though salespeople love to talk
we
generally.
do.
Oh dear. And then what do you usually find gets lost between the conversation and the follow-up? So is there anything else that you find usually gets lost between the conversation and the follow-up, or is that the main thing, do you think?
Yeah, I think after the follow-up, if the follow-up is not done very quickly, I think once you're looking at day 2, day 3, there's a lot of people that would feel somewhat embarrassed to still send a follow-up email. And the reality, it's not. We all have times when we're busy, and we can't say that we're always busy, because we're not. It goes with peaks and troughs. But if you are in a busy time, it's okay if you send an email after 3 days or 4 days, because you are still following up and you're still thinking of your customer. And in fact, sometimes it's better to send it a few days later, just to refresh that you've been there with the customer. So sometimes that's what gets lost after a couple of days. We're embarrassed to send that follow-up email, and then we get caught up in other things.
Do you have a system that helps you with that, or is that something that you're coaching your team to do?
Yeah, I'm trying to coach the team. I think what's very important for a sales manager is to talk to the sales team, listen to them. First of all, we're the conduit between the sales team and the key leadership team. And when there's busy times, we need to create an environment where they're able to still do their job properly. And that means sometimes we have to tell them not to do tasks that are not really effective. It's very easy to pivot into a task that someone asks you to do something which is not really your core job, but we feel comfortable with it and we feel like we achieve something, but it's not your job. And so it's really, in a fun way, dealing with the team and saying, hey guys, just keep focusing on what you need to do. That's your priority. And if I can take away some of their pain points, then that's my role. And I'm trying to set, I guess, a bit of a schedule for them as well. In the morning, you come in, you can't ring customers at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's a good time to do your follow-up emails, do a bit of your admin. And then in the middle of the day, that's when you can ring customers or you're indeed out on the road. And then late in the afternoon, again, it's a bit of time to do some admin and some follow-ups. And yes, we all get distracted by phone calls and emails from customers, but we have to rely on the broader team, whether it's a sales support or customer service. And we need to be comfortable in sharing that.
I think something that I've learned recently is you feel annoying sending follow-ups sometimes, but people are so in their own world and busy with everything that's going on. A lot of the time, they actually appreciate the follow-up. And I think actually a great example was me reaching out to you for this podcast. I think I followed you up twice before you actually booked it in after you agreed to do it. And that wasn't because I'm assuming it wasn't because you didn't want to do it. It was just because you were busy doing other things and you didn't get a chance, and it fallen off your priority list because your priorities are with yourself and what your workplace is. And then just that, having that system for me, I need to have the system behind me to be able to do the follow-ups because my brain doesn't work in a way where I remember to do follow-ups on my own. Me personally, I built my own system to be able to make sure that I do those follow-ups in a timely manner and keep me on track. So I think it's so important just to, one, don't feel weird about doing it because people actually appreciate it more than they don't. And if they don't want it, they'll let you know and you can just stop following up with them. That's fine.
Yep.
Respect their time, respect their...
That's right.
Yeah. But for the most part, people appreciate it.
Yeah. And Brendan, can you share with me what type of a system do you have? Is it a manual system? Do you use Outlook? Do you use other tools?
So I actually built my own system that I'm using to manage my LinkedIn DMs. So I'm heavily using LinkedIn DMs to reach out for this podcast. And I've actually built my own system where I log the DMs that I've sent and who I've sent it to. And then I have a built-in sequence that it then reminds me. And I just have a look every day who I need to remessage, go back on there and check in with where that message is up to, etc. So that's just something that's helped me. I built it myself using AI, as well as my other program, which is sponsoring this podcast. So that system that I built is actually just for me to use. I don't know if I'll be selling that or not, but on top of
You might be onto something.
Yeah, potentially. If anyone's listening and wants to know, just let me know. No, I'm kidding. So I didn't bring it up to plug it. Like it's genuinely helped me, like having a system. It doesn't matter what the system is, whether it's just using reminders in your phone, whether it's using your calendar. It doesn't matter what your system is. It's just having something that works for you to remind you to do the follow-up because it is important and people do appreciate it, I think is the main point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And especially when you lead a team, you have a diverse team. So I find it very important to look at the personality rather than to try and create a team where everyone is the same, and it just doesn't exist. We're all different. And what that means is some people are very adapt to technology, whereas other people, for example, still use an old-fashioned diary. And that's okay, because if it works for them, you get the best out of them. If you want to push them to a new system too hard, then you actually lose motivation there.
Yeah, 100%. And especially if a lot of systems, I feel like these days are built from a feature perspective and not built from a simplistic view of the user. And that's where I think a lot of things go wrong. But yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So when the calendars do fill up and the reps are running visit to visit, they got a busy day on, the Sydney traffic's horrible as it usually is. What do you see that is usually the first thing to slip for them?
I think it's fair to say proper follow-ups is the first thing that would slip. Absolutely. We are trying to take away some of the pressures through sales support so they can ring in and get assistance that someone else already does some prep work. So that helps them. But definitely the follow-up is one of them. Sometimes what happens is a rep is, you're in sales, you want to achieve. So if you've done 4 meetings, but one is a real good hot opportunity, that is obviously at the top of the list. But what about the ones that are at the bottom? They're still an important customer. So we're just trying to go through that. So I think it's important that reps are accountable for what they do. We just go through a weekly sort of a plan. Who did you see? Who are you seeing next week? And just to make sure that everyone gets the right attention. So it does come back to accountability and the internal support. But yeah, normally the follow-up is the number one that drops.
100%. I've seen that as well. Typically, then, do you see more revenue or relationships lost from poor selling or from poor execution after the selling in your experience?
Well, that's a very good question. See, I think it's all part of the sales process. And obviously, with your podcast, you're focusing on the general sales process. So I guess where a good sales rep stands out is they do the sale good. Therefore, they're listening to the customers, they solve the pain points that the customer has, and they do the follow-up. So it's a complete package. If you don't do a good sales pitch with the customer, you don't have a good meeting, therefore you're not building that rapport there, then it doesn't matter what you do after, they're not really keen to do business with you. So you have to establish that relationship. And sometimes it's hard in the first meeting. You have to sometimes see a customer 2 or 3 times to really get that bond. But people buy from people. And so it's both. We have that first meeting, do a good follow-up, and in that follow-up, you will have to say, look, what we'll do is in 2 weeks' time or in 3 weeks. So you set another target. They know what's coming. I guess after the follow-up, what comes after the follow-up? And if that's quiet, the customer is not just going to ring you saying, hey, I haven't heard from you.
Yeah, 100%. They're waiting for you to reach out to them. They're not running after you to throw money at you.
No, no.
No one's doing that. And if they are, well, man, hold them close because that is an ideal customer. Kind of leads well into my next question too. If I was to shadow one of your top reps for a week, what would they consistently do within 30 minutes of each customer meeting, do you think?
They would make it very clear that they listen to the customer. They would repeat what the customer said. So, and it is definitely standard sentences like, so just to make sure that I understand you. And then they basically copy what the customer had said. That's very important. But I also think the initial meeting before we start talking business, it's just trying to be a little bit relaxed, personable. We're not robots. As I said before, people buy from people. It's important to build up a bit of a rapport, get to know the person. You start a little bit in the beginning of that meeting with that. And then at the end of the meeting as well, you talk about life. If we just stick to selling a product or a business, you're not memorable. So it's really building that relationship, making sure you make it very clear you listen to the customer and you make them feel valuable.
I think that does two things as well. Just rolling back to what you said before about repeating what the customer said to you. One, it makes them feel heard and seen, which is invaluable in a relationship. In any relationship, not just a business relationship. But two, it's also helping retain that information in your own brain as well for when you get back to your car and you do those notes. It's like it's kind of twofold helping you with that process. So I love that. So from your perspective as a sales manager, how do you really know what was said in meetings? And then where do managers typically overestimate their visibility into what is actually happening in those meetings?
So it depends on what the meeting is about. So once, for example, we start working on a project, we talk about projects in project meetings. So it's pretty clear what's been discussed, where we at, what's the next step. If the meeting is about, let's just say there's some problems raised, then that gets sort of raised with me as well. So in general, we discuss the meetings. As I mentioned before, we do weekly sheet of who we saw and who we're seeing next week, which allows everyone to talk about the meetings, what needs to be done, and as the manager, do I need to help them to get things sorted for the customer, to prioritize things, or get people in operations to help out a little bit quicker than normal. So it comes down to open communication. I don't micromanage. I don't want to know every meeting what's been discussed. I don't look over the notes, but obviously we have targets in regards to sales numbers, number of projects. We want to see a number of top level specifiers. And so we talk about it on a weekly basis with the team. And then the one-on-one talk, I talk to the guys all the time, but I really steer away from micromanaging. It makes people feel being looked over the shoulder all the time. And I think there's nothing better for a manager to build a team that's independent and motivated to do their job every day.
I think the key point there for your team, particularly in the way that you manage, which is it's just a great way to manage. But at the same time, your team has to be quite capable of making sure they're on top of their shit to make sure that they bring the right things to those meetings. Otherwise, you're going to miss a lot because you're putting a lot of faith in your team to make sure they highlight what needs to be highlighted. So I guess from that point, it's great that you have that trust with your team, but not everyone may have that, or some reps may not be at that level yet. So for those kinds of people, what would you recommend? How do you help your team get to that level? Or what do you see in your team that other people could take on to make sure they are highlighting the right things and making sure that things don't slip through the crack?
Yeah, look, that comes down to coaching, and I think doing joint calls will show you very quickly what someone's capable of. It's important as a manager to be honest with your team, and it doesn't mean that you put them down, but it's really about the coaching aspect. I think sometimes when a sales rep goes out with their manager, they feel, oh, I've got the boss with me and I have to be on my best behavior. It's important that the team, when they see a customer, that they're themselves. You know, don't try and be someone else. Don't try and be, or try and look like you're smarter than you are, or just have your natural ability out there, because that's what people want to see. And as a manager, you can see that in your team, because you go out there and all of a sudden you look at your sales rep and you think, well, hang on, you're not like that in the office. You're a likable person, but you're trying to be so serious. Be yourself. And I think that's what's important as a manager, that you give them that confidence that they can be themselves, and they are good. But I think also what I do with my team is say, look, okay, well, what are the tools that you need from me? So when you go and visit a customer, what are you talking about? So what is it that you want to achieve? And again, most important thing is listening to the customer, because often the door opener is potentially a product. Is it important that you do your spiel about that? Absolutely not. It's important that you sit in front of the customer and have a conversation and build a rapport. Whether you get to talk about your product at that stage is not important. You can do that in a follow-up meeting, but you want to build up the rapport if that's a new customer. If it's an existing customer, you can talk about your product. You set your agenda. You said, this is what we want to present to you, but let the customer talk.
And you've got to let the customer lead you where they want that meeting, especially in that B2B world where you're having a long-term relationship with these customers. You don't know whether this month they've had 1,000 things go wrong, so that they just want to get off their chest with you. And if you go in there and just start talking about product straight away, they're going to just get even more infuriated. Whereas if you go in there with an open mind and hear them first, understand that they want to vent their frustrations to you, just hear them, listen to them, make them feel heard and seen. And then if they then ask you, oh, is there something new that you wanted to show me or something, then that's the opening for you. But you can't just go in there and be like, this is my product, blah, 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 because you don't know what's going on in their world until you ask them and actually hear them. And that's so important.
So it's important that when you're talking to your sales team, that they understand what their job is. The job is not indeed just to put that product in front of a customer. It's a door opener. We want to build a rapport with them. We want to get continued sales from them or specifications from them. So we want the customer to talk. And I've had it myself over the years where I went in with a product or had a couple of brochures with me, and you're talking to a customer, and as you're talking, you look at them and they're looking at a brochure or product, but it's a different product that you were actually talking about. So you change your subject. So you're asking, okay, you find it interesting. And if I can then sort of coach the team that it's okay that you go in for A, but you walk out with B. That's fantastic.
In terms of systems then, so as well as alluding to before with the team staying on top of their stuff, making sure they know what they need to highlight at these weekly meetings. Do you guys use a CRM or something to keep track of all your notes? What do you guys use system-wise to make sure everything, your reps know exactly what's going on and what they're doing with their customers, and then they can also flag things that they need to bring up with you in those weekly meetings? What does that typically look like for you guys?
Yeah. So we actually moved away from quite a large CRM system to a very simplified system in BC, Microsoft BC. There is the capability to have some notes there, but it's not excessively detailed, which is good because in the past, and I've worked with a number of different CRM systems, sometimes the focus of the company is just purely on KPIs, on entries in CRMs, and they're spending more time behind the computer than out on the road or talking to customers. So we keep it simple. And what that means is that when you deal with a customer, and whether there's an issue raised or there's a sales opportunity, you deal with that. There's some minimal notes, but you make sure you follow through straight away rather than have an essay of information in the CRM system. It's really about what needs to happen for this customer. What do we need to do? And just have some basic notes in it so that if I want to have a look at it at the customer, I can sort of understand what's happening over there. And if I have more questions, I can ask any of the team what happened there, and they will tell me the whole story. But yeah, I think sometimes the CRM system is limiting for a sales team.
Yeah, in a way, I think they go in with the right, like CRM systems go in with the right intention of trying to bring more capability to the sales team. But what they do wrong, what I find typically, especially with SMEs, maybe as you get to larger corporations, it might be slightly different. But typically in SME world where I usually live, CRM systems, big ones like HubSpot, Salesforce, those kind of things, they're too complicated. They're trying to shove too many, and I alluded to this before, trying to shove too many features down your throat. And then, they're all great. They're all really good features, but it ends up being so much information that you just do nothing and you don't know what to do. You don't know where to go. You don't know what things to use. And like you said, the managers get stuck on KPIs because they've got all these fancy dashboards that they want to look at. And the actual purpose of the CRM was just to have somewhere to capture the information and somewhere where you can reflect back on it so you know where that it's customer relationship management. That's what CRM stands for. And I feel like that's been lost with a lot of systems going forward. And that's what I was saying before is like simplistic. You have to think from a simplistic, especially people on the road. Like you don't have time to be dealing with a complex system. You just want somewhere simple where you can capture your notes and move on with your life. Maybe do a follow-up, maybe something like that. But I think that's so key.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. Simplify things. I think, break things down in smaller portions. The more information there is in the system, and I think everyone's worked with a CRM system. When you look at your opportunities, and there's rows and rows of information there. Where do you start? And then you have your follow-up tasks, and your follow-up task, especially if you've been on leave, on a sick leave, or there's been a public holiday, and 6 months ago you just put it on that day, all of a sudden on one day, instead of having 10 follow-up calls, you got 20 follow-up calls, and you just can't keep up anymore. And it's just overcomplicated. So yeah, I think it's really about looking at your opportunities, simplify it, knowing when you have to ring one of the stakeholders without getting too much on your plate.
That. All right, I've got a closing question for you. Might be a follow-up after. We'll see how we go. If you could eliminate one friction point that happens after a client visit, what would it be?
Well, that's a very good question. I think in general, it really depends on what type of a meeting you've had, obviously. I think meetings, what's very important is to have a follow-up, whether it's a follow-up call, meeting that you can set there. But in regards to frictions, yeah, I don't really see any major frictions. I think the only thing is when someone sets out a day and tries to achieve too much, that's a friction point for a sales rep. So again, 6, 7 meetings in a day, especially in Sydney, it's just It's just not going to happen properly. What'll happen is people will sit in a meeting, and as they're in a meeting, they're looking at their watch. I've got to go. I've got to go to the next meeting. I don't want to disappoint them, but you're disappointing the person you're sitting in front. And so I think in regards to a meeting, the most important thing is that you have enough time afterwards to travel to your next meeting, but also to write down your notes.
Have you ever had a situation where the relationship deteriorated simply because that follow-up lacked clarity or speed?
Look, I'm sure it's happened. We all have had situations. I can't remember of a specific story as of late, but I know it's happened where years ago I probably promised something in a meeting. I'm going to do this, and it just never happened. And so that was a big mistake on my behalf. Then you finally ring a customer, and obviously the first thing you hear is, well, you told me you were going to do this, this, and this. How can I trust you? And I think, that's something that's extremely important for sales reps in general. When we deal with customers, do what you say. And everyone's going to have an example like that. We've all been there, and for all different reasons, but it is so important. If you promise something, make sure you follow up on that. Make good. That's how customer can trust you.
And don't make promises that you can't keep, that you're expecting your ops team to keep or somebody else in the team to keep.
Exactly.
That's another big no-no that I see salespeople do a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're better off indeed to say, look, I'm going to come back on you on that. I just want to make sure I give you the proper information instead of saying, yeah, not a problem, we can do that, because all sorts of bigger problems can be created. You deliver a product that's either not of high quality, or it's not delivered or delivered too late.
Yeah. And the customer is always going to appreciate that transparency where you're actually going to check, as opposed to there's only certain customers that are going to really want you to say yes in front of them right now. And they're not good customers. They are customers that you don't want, because they're going to cause issues no matter what happens. If they are just looking for you to say yes, one, your team's probably not going to be able to deliver on it if you're just saying yes without checking. And then you're going to frustrate the customer anyway. So either way, you're frustrating the customer. You're better off not frustrating your team at the same time, keeping good with your own team that needs to also trust you. Frustrate the customer a little by being honest and transparent, but giving them the right information. And then they'll actually trust you more after the fact, I feel. Or if they don't, and they're that 1% of customers that are just expletive word, insert expletive, then you don't want them as a customer anyway. There's more customers out there.
That's right. And look, I guess the other thing comes back to the subject of this podcast is that gives you another opportunity to follow up with the customer. If anything is just falling into your lap, it is basically saying, hey, that's a really good point. I just want to do the research, talk to the team, and I'll get back to you on that. How about I get back to you in 2 days? Would that work? Then you set something up. You're building a rapport with the customer. Yes, from a sales point of view, you want to win, so you're going to say yes, but you don't want to do that, like you just said, right? So you're better off saying, hey, good point. How about I get back to you in 2 days? And you have another follow-up. You have another touch point. And that's a really good opportunity.
You're never going to fuck on the first date anyway. So you need to build that rapport, as you've said throughout this whole pod. You need to have those touch points. I remember reading a study. It was 7 or 11. I can't remember exactly what it was. Might be 11. 11 touch points before a customer will buy from you. So you need to have those touch points in, and they can be follow-ups, they can be emails, they can be phone calls, but it's not going to happen unless they're the ultimate customer that are ready to buy as soon as you walk in. Or if it's a good company that's had good rapport with them already, that might be a different scenario. But if this is a fresh, cold customer that you're first walking into for the first time, you're nine times out of 10, you're not selling to them straight away. You need to have that initial meeting with them, build that relationship, and then continue building that relationship through those follow-ups, through those touch points. And then down the road, eventually they will probably buy from you, but not until you have those touch points. So it's allowing you those extra touch points. It's an easy touch point.
Exactly.
Any excuse you can get to call them should be a good excuse, because you need to get those touch points in, and just calling someone with no reason can be annoying. But if you've got a reason, they can at least understand why you're calling them.
That's right. And you're value adding to the customer.
Well, that's all for my questions. Thank you for your time today, Sandor. It was amazing having you on. I think it was a really good conversation.
Thanks, Brandon.
So the mistake most teams make is thinking relationships are built in the meeting. They're actually built in what happens after it. The clarity of the notes, the speed of the follow-up, consistency of execution, and the visibility leaders have into all of it. That's the problem I'm working on with Have a Chat. And if this episode made you reflect on what really happens after the visits, then it did its job. Thanks for listening. I'm Brendan Welsh, and this is After the Visit.